Hi, my name is Liam Walsh and I'm a PhD researcher. Records of fermentation date back to 7000 BC. Back then our ancient ancestors didn't know that microorganisms were responsible for making their cheese or yogurt. But in the 19th century, a French scientist called Louis Pasteur wanted to know why some foods and drinks had a sour taste. He discovered that the yeast are naturally present in wine, but when he boiled the grape juice, the yeast didn't grow and the sour and alcoholic taste was not produced. This was the first indication that microbes cause fermentation. Fermentation occurs naturally when sugars in the food, certain microorganisms, and suitable storage conditions coincide. Fermenting microorganisms act as miniature factories, enhancing the food's nutritional content and manufacturing new tastes, odors, and health-promoting qualities. Since Louis Pasteur's discovery, we have developed new ways to investigate the bacteria that ferment our foods. The bacteria most commonly associated with fermentation are lactic acid bacteria, so called because they use the sugar lactose as their energy source and produce lactic acid. It is this lactic acid that is responsible for the characteristic sour taste, while also having a preserving effect by lowering the pH of the food, creating an environment that is unsuitable for bad bacteria, preventing their growth. Lactic acid bacteria are responsible for dairy fermentations because the lactose content in milk gives them the ideal environment to thrive. Lactic acid bacteria are easy to grow in the lab on nutrient broth or agar plates, which provide them with all the nutrients they need. For decades, microbiologists have studied lactic acid bacteria, including their fermentation abilities and their potential health benefits for humans. Some strains of lactic acid bacteria are now known to be good probiotics, good bacteria which have health benefits for the host. They can help our immune system, our heart health, and help us protect from other bacteria that might cause disease. But not all microbes can be grown easily in the lab. Fermentative bacteria are by their nature anaerobic. They don't like oxygen. Here in Teagasc, we're using new DNA sequencing technology to investigate all the microbes in our fermented foods. DNA is made up of a sequence of 4 nucleotides. Think of them as letters. And the way the letters are arranged determines the genetic information they encode. In humans, this genetic information might determine what color eyes or hair we have, while for a microbe, it might determine its ability to make a tangy sourdough or particularly flavoursome cheese. To do this, we break up the food and the bacterial cells, releasing their DNA. We then run the DNA on a DNA sequencing machine, and we use computing analysis and coding to identify the microbes that were present in the food. Using this technology, we have found new species of bacteria that can influence the taste and colour of cheese. DNA sequencing has also revealed that many of the potential probiotic microbes in fermented foods can also be found in the human gut. This means that when we consume fermented foods, the good bacteria can adapt and survive in our gut.
My name is Deirdre Kennedy and I'm the microstructure technologist at Teagasc Food Research Centre, Moore Park. We know that microscopes can be used to look at bacteria, but what about food? What's beneath the surface? I work in the National Food Imaging Centre in Teagasc Moore Park. Our research looks at the composition, formulation and processing of food and the effect that they have on the microstructure of food. We can say that all foods have a structure. This structure may be formed on different levels by a combination of the various ingredients and processes that take place when it's being made. We need to understand how processing of food creates a product structure and how ingredients and raw materials interact to form structures. For example, the same ingredients are used to make cream, where water is the continuous phase, and make butter, which is an oil continuous spread. This is because we change the structure of foods during processing. For example, even though cheese and yogurt are both fermented milk products, they have completely different colour, taste and texture. Does a wobbly set yogurt feel different in your mouth than a smooth, drinkable yogurt? Of course it does. The structure forms during the fermentation process, and the texture of the food depends on how different components such as fats, proteins and carbohydrates interact with each other, as well as the water and air present in the food. These ingredients also influence the nutritional quality of the food, while the sugar content can also influence the fermentation process by the bacteria. Here at the National Food Imaging Centre in Moorpark, we use state-of-the-art microscopes to look at the structure of food up close. We can look at the various ingredients, the size of particles, how they interact with each other, and how this changes the texture and functionality of foods. We can look at the microorganisms in our fermented foods and see their size and shape, see if they're alive or dead. We have specialised equipment we can attach to various microscopes so we can watch how the food structure changes during heating, cooling or mechanical stress. This process here helps us understand the breaking process of cheese when we eat it. We have a high-speed camera that can film up to 100,000 frames per second. We use this to look at fast processes in slow motion, like tracking how a powder particle dissolves in water. We can play detective with equipment that can identify individual components such as contaminants. We can scan a food and identify all components by their chemical fingerprints. This allows us to trace contaminants, identify functional ingredients, and track where all components are located in a food, telling us so much about what our food is made up of and in what way. We even use virtual reality to look inside our foods. Did you ever think you could put your head inside a loaf of bread and see its every detail? Did you think you could walk inside a meat carcass? With the virtual reality headset and controls, we can immerse ourselves in the food and do real-life four-dimensional analysis. Instead of seeing things in 2D and 3D on screens, we can, for example, measure the air spaces in this tiny powder particle using hand controllers with clever software and Oculus headsets. This gives a really good idea of how these structures are built and help us understand how to create the perfect crunch, chew, or slurp.
Hi, I'm Ricardo Uribe. I'm a PhD student in Teagasc Moorpark. It's hard to get kids to eat healthy food sometimes. A little creativity can help. My project is called 3D Dairy and it's about using 3D printing for developing new dairy snacks. 3D printing is a process of building solid objects layer by layer of any material capable of fusing and forming stable self-supporting structures. The origin of this technology goes back to the 70s. The most common materials used by 3D printers are plastic and metals. I will be using food. In the food industry, 3D printing is still at an early stage but with great potential to develop high-value food products. So far, food products that have a paste-type consistency have been mostly used for 3D food printing as they can behave like a liquid or solid under specific conditions. Food with this unique behavior are also known as viscoelastic foods. Cheese is viscoelastic. For example, cheddar cheese at room temperature is hard, behaves like a solid, but if you heat it, it can flow and behaves like a liquid, as all pizza lovers know. So by controlling conditions such as the temperature and flow rate, we can manipulate the behavior of a food formulation so it can be 3D printed. Some food products that have been successfully printed due to their viscoelastic properties include dough, chocolate, mashed potato, cheese, and meat paste. 3D food printing can be used to design more visually appealing products with personalized nutrition according to a consumer's needs. For example, we know that a lot of parents struggle with encouraging their kids to eat healthy diets. To tackle this, food scientists have used 3D printing to develop food snacks based on a blend of fruit and vegetable in a shape of a cartoon character, for example an octopus, making it more attractive and fun for the kids to eat their greens. With 3D food printing, we can control the texture of a food to make it easier to eat, which is especially important for people with chewing or swallowing difficulties. 3D printing offers the means of developing food that are designed to consist of the optimal macro and micronutrients required to match the dietary requirements of individuals, such as children, athletes, elderly, and expectant mothers. As we look to more sustainable food production, 3D food printing can help in reducing food waste as it only prints quantities of raw materials that are required to build a structure. In my project, which is funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, I'm looking at using dairy ingredients to develop 3D printed dairy snacks. We're using dairy ingredients as the proteins present in the milk provide essential properties required to build 3D objects. Milk proteins are also leading sources of high-quality protein in the human diet. Therefore, we can design snacks using dairy ingredients that have high protein content in tailored amounts for specific consumer groups. I am investigating the 3D printing parameters and the concentrations of milk proteins required to build a self-supporting structure. This dairy formulation will be used in a food-grade 3D printer that is going to be exclusively developed to print dairy snacks.
My name is Behra. I am a PhD student at Teagasc, Moorpark. By 2050, the world's population is set to reach 10 billion. To feed them, we are going to need to change how we produce our food. AI and robotics are being considered as new and sustainable techniques for food enhancement. In other words, increasing the yield or quality in production. In my PhD project, my work is focused on developing quality measurements that ensure that Irish dairy powders are consistently of a high quality. I use robots, sensors, and AI to carry out experiments and quality measurements on powders like coffee creamers and whole milk powders. For example, I programmed the robot to add a coffee creamer to coffee, similar to how the end user would do. Then the robot automatically measures the quality of the mixture using sensors and a camera. Precision measurements and AI allows us to understand what's happening in the cup so we can make changes and see how they perform. Robots can do repetitive tasks for several thousands of hours without getting bored. They also can perform particular tasks with high enough accuracy. For example, they can make the exact same cup of coffee and over again. Essentially, they are flexible machines as we can change the program to define a variety of tasks for them. There are lots of different robots being used in food plants or farms all around the world. Especially for food packaging, we can place applications or even harvesting crops. Here in Teagasc, I'm working on a type of robot called a collaborative robot or a cobot. This robot is especially designed for safe interaction with humans and workers in industrial environments like dairy plants. Using a cobot, we can perform tasks that are relatively difficult and repetitive or even dangerous for humans, or tasks that require a higher level of accuracy. We use a cobot to look at the mixability of a dairy powder. With the cobot, we can examine why certain dairy powders can mix better than others. Let's take the coffee example again. Have you seen the undissolved white particles in your coffee after you add coffee creamer powder to it? As part of these experiments, researchers need to prepare the samples, for example coffee creamers, in the same manner that the final consumer would prepare the sample. Then they can estimate the quality parameters of the final product, and if it is not suitable, then make changes to the production process. Our cobot can prepare food exactly as we do at home. How? Firstly, our cobot has 7 motors or joints in its arm, similar to a human arm, which means that it can mimic a human's movements. Secondly, our cobot can be integrated with different sensors to record and simulate what happens during the mixing process. By using a cobot, I can ensure the quality of powders by eliminating unsavory lumps in your coffee and test how new products perform against old ones by keeping the process identical every single time.